My story starts when I was 19 years old, when I got married. In one of our first fights, I remember thinking afterward, if I don't change, this man is going to kill me. And that was such a deep, scary, sobering thought that I kind of had to push it to the back of my mind. And I did that for almost 10 years, just pushing all the thoughts to the back of my mind. I really started to feel like I was going crazy. And I didn't know how to explain it because he never hit me. My name wasn't on any bank account. I had no access to money, but he never hit me. I didn't understand words like emotional manipulation, gaslighting, trauma. I didn't know there were actually 5 kinds of abuse: mental, spiritual, financial, emotional, and sexual. I didn't understand or even know any of this. The resounding thought of he never hit me wouldn't leave my mind. So I just went along with things for another 5 years. Things kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more out of control. We had a big life. We had 3 kids. We were homeschooling. We were directors at our church and different ministries. We were on the worship team. I was on the board of directors. Our life looked very much one way on Sunday and very different Monday through Saturday. And those days were a living hell in our home. During those days, I didn't want to tell anyone or bring it up. So for another 5 years, this went on. And those were the darkest 5 years I've ever felt. I started suffering from adrenal fatigue and PTSD. I was so embarrassed and ashamed. I couldn't even tell my friends because they were also leaders in the church, and I really didn't want to tarnish his reputation or make him look bad in any way. I was ashamed because my marriage looked awful inside closed doors, and their marriages all appeared so good. I was also confused, and I wondered, where is God? What is happening with my life? We did decide to go to a really known Christian counseling center, and while there were many great things that happened through that experience in general, one thing I've noticed then and since then in Christian counseling, a lot of times the answers given to the women, be submissive, be more sexually available, and be less selfish. Now, those are good and biblical things, but when you're in an abusive situation, those things kind of feel like a noose around your neck because you're constantly trying to comply with that. And then you're already doing your absolute best with everything thrown at you. There's so much pressure coming from all sides, from religion, from scripture, even if it's misinterpreted. And it just piles on to the trauma and abuse that you're experiencing and that you've already experienced and been living with. And I was feeling all of that. Everything was just getting so twisted in my own mind about my own life. Pretty soon, the abuse started to escalate to physical things. And even though he still never hit me, it was things like him punching a wall right next to my head, or him smashing things or throwing things. And I knew it was just a matter of time. I could feel it deep inside me before things would escalate to where he would physically harm me or the kids. At that point, we went to a private counselor. The counselor looked at me and said, "You need to get a life." And I thought, I have a life. I am too busy for hobbies. I'm too busy for friends. I'm too busy for anything except living. I am in survival mode. I am trying to protect myself. I'm trying to protect my 3 kids. I live in constant fear, in panic, and pure adrenaline. At this point, I have no hobbies, no outside interests, no things that don't have an exact place in my life. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew maybe he had a point. And it wasn't just get a life in that sense. I think the point he was trying to make was that I had twisted myself into such a pretzel trying to please someone else that it was harming me and my children. And I couldn't even see any way out. So I started the untwisting process. I had turned my ex-husband into a godlike person. And sadly, he and all his affairs and all of his abuse, well, let's just say it like this. Even though he was living like king of the castle, he had no respect, no love, no responsibility, and no accountability to the people that lived in that castle. There was a huge disconnect. The last 3 years of my 23-year marriage was the most horrible I had ever lived through. I knew I needed some kind of help, some place to go for me and my 3. I needed a lot of help, actually. I was making a lot of big decisions, and there were no faith-based resources to help guide me through my pain and on my path. I knew I had made a commitment before God, and I kept saying those infamous words, "This is a covenant." But I was so mixed up in my theology, I just couldn't turn it around. It was so messed up because of the abuse, and I didn't know what to do anymore. I prayed and I fasted and I read book after book after book about self-help and boundaries, thinking, girl, you just need some boundaries. After all of this, nothing changed. Except me. I changed. I was learning what was happening to me little by little, and I got peace, and then I got courage, and then I got separated, and then I got divorced, and then I was free. And while I say that all in one sentence, it was a very long process, and it was super heartbreaking, and it was so painful. There was a lot of anger, a lot of grief. There was sadness and so many emotions involved. But despite all of that, this statement rang true. I was free, and my children were free. And God used that to redeem so much brokenness. Statistics show that 1 in 3 women are in the same position, and they're just like me. They're homeschooling moms, worship leaders, ministry leaders, people who love Jesus. They just don't know what to do with this thing they call marriage. They have big fears about finances and children and their future and their relationship with God after divorce. And what happens if I do get a divorce? What happens if I separate, especially if there's no infidelity and abuse is still being suffered? They've been told they can't remarry if they get divorced. They're hopeless. They have no path forward. And that's why I became a Christian counselor and a life coach, because I want to help women know there is a way out. I remember one time I was crying on the bathroom floor. I literally could not get up, couldn't make myself get up. And 2 of my kids came running in, and they were rubbing my back and just speaking so sweetly to me. And my little Levi looked at me and said, "Mom, you need hope." And I thought, that's exactly what I need. But then I realized I have hope. Hebrews 6:18 says we hold this hope as an anchor to our souls, our mind, our will, and our emotion. That when the oceans around us get so big and so overwhelming and so cold and dark and powerful, we have an anchor. And this anchor is trustworthy and secure. And that's how Hopeful Healing Boxes were born, out of that hope.